Welcome to the podcast. Today we're joined by Morag Gamble, a resident of a permaculture village near Maleny in southwest Queensland, Australia. Morag exemplifies sustainable living, embracing an off-grid lifestyle with her family in a modular eco-home. They thrive on permaculture ventures, maintaining a lush garden and renewable energy production. Morag prioritises her children's connection to nature through ecological unschooling, and she passionately shares her journey to inspire sustainable living and ecological restoration in others. Have a listen now to our podcast with Morag Gamble.
Okay, guys, welcome to the podcast. This week we have Morag Gamble on. Morag has been in permaculture for a very long time and living at Crystal Waters for almost a quarter of a century, we just found out. Crystal Waters is probably one of Australia's first largest eco-villages, permaculture village. So, Morag, tell us about yourself and your life and, yeah.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show, Mike. Well, yeah, you're right. It's actually over a quarter of a century now. I couldn't believe it when I realised. I was like, oh, gosh. I moved here to Crystal Waters. So Crystal Waters it's actually the first consciously designed permaculture village in the world. And it's 640 acres and we each have about an acre that's our own that we, design our houses and our off-grid systems. And each of those homes is in like a little hamlet cluster, and there's a series of hamlets around the village, and over 80% of the land is common land. So for regeneration of the forest, for collecting water and replenishing, rehydrating the landscape, and there's no cats or dogs, so it's like this wildlife habitat. It's a brilliant place to live. It's a brilliant place to base yourself as, particularly for me, I moved here. I was involved in setting up a place called Northey Street City Farm in Brisbane. So that was, 30 odd years ago. And I was really keen on trying to ground myself in a place where I could live and work and play and raise a family and do all the things I want to do, but with my feet firmly grounded in an ecological way of life. And so that my values were kind of ran through everything that I did. I really wanted to live it, but also then demonstrate it, because my background's in landscape architecture and I'd never practiced in a landscape architecture office or wanted to start one up. What I always wanted to do was to find a way to enable anyone to design their landscape, but to design it in a way that made sense, that fitted with local community, which was supportive of regenerating landscape, regenerating communities. And that's permaculture for me. And so I wanted to make sure I'd played with it myself, really embedded myself deeply in it, and could set up systems that were demonstrations that people could come and walk through, see, taste, touch, feel, and just be immersed in it. So I moved here in my 20s and started building my house here, stick by stick, never with any debt. So I've really tried to do kind of like debt-free, off-grid, abundant, simple way of life. That meant that my business grew out of the garden, my children have grown out of the garden, I'm growing with my feet firmly grounded in this beautiful gubby country here. And it's so refreshing. Like I can't even begin to explain the sense of freedom that I have, the real freedom living this off-grid, debt-free way of life, and how connected I feel to every single thing that's around me, the more than human and the community, because of that deep relationality that you do when you're involved in something so deeply. So I kind of came to this because in my earlier 20s, I went and studied at this incredible place called Schumacher College in England. I'd been reading all this systems thinking work, Fritjof Capra. I don't know if you've come across his work. He's like this renowned systems thinker, and actually his work is part of the inspiration of permaculture as well. And I saw that he was teaching at this Schumacher College, so I went there and studied. I studied with Vandana Shiva and I studied deep ecology and Gaia theory and all these sort of backgrounding things. And then I came away from that thinking, what am I supposed to do? I've got my head full of all this ecological philosophy and thinking and eco-politics and eco-psychology. What do I do with it? How do I live this? And that's kind of like where permaculture really grounded. But also part of that while I was there, I went and spent quite a bit of time volunteering up in Ladakh, in the other side of the Himalayas. One of the women who runs the programs there, who's from your region, Helena Norberg Hodge, she runs the Local Futures, and she's been deeply involved in Ladakh for a very long time. And it was there that I first experienced what it really meant to live a sustainable way of life. Like, I knew it in my head. I studied environmental planning, landscape architecture. I knew what sustainability meant, but I didn't at the same time. Like, what does it actually mean? You can write it down. I could write an essay. I could do a presentation and try and convince you that sustainability is the way to go, but I didn't actually know what it really meant to live. I grew up in the suburbs of Melbourne in a pretty low-key life, and it was probably pretty sustainable in a lot of ways, but I didn't really know it until I was in Ladakh, and everything was coming from the earth and going back to the earth, and there was this simplicity and this relationality and the way that they related with the water systems, the soil systems, the waste systems, the community, the way that the built environment was formed, everything about it. It just, I could still feel it now. I had this visceral tingling sense of awakening. It's like, oh, this is what it is. And so really understanding too that, well, that's not what Australia's like, but what is it about the essence of that we can translate into today? And so that's why I'm landed here in the eco village, in the permaculture world, trying to explore with my life and with my family life what that actually means here in Australia, and then sharing it out through the lens of permaculture, because it's the languaging system that I can see that seems to articulate that most clearly.
Yeah, no, it's just like so with that word sustainability, if you were to sum it up in a short sentence, like, what does it mean to you to be sustainable?
Oh, in the simplest way, I would say it's about living a one planet way of life. You know, it's like we have one planet, and at the moment, we have. If you look at the ecological footprint studies, Australians are typically, if you add up all the footprint of people in Australia, their ecological footprint, we would need 4 Earths to meet our needs and absorb our wastes. If you add up the global population's footprint, we need 1.7 Earths. We only have one. So what does it mean to actually live within the means of this beautiful planet that we have? That everything can come from the earth, go back to the earth, that we're consuming in a way that is low energy, is low resources. Like, what do we actually need, not what do we want? So the simplest way is like one planet way of life. And that can look so different for every single person, whether you're living in a walkable city in an apartment, or whether you're living an off-grid life, down in Lismore somewhere. There's very different way that you apply it, but that sort of lens of going, oh yeah, okay, my decision-making framework is based on, I really want to try and make sure that I'm living a one planet way of life. And you make just different choices, decisions based on that understanding. Yeah. And I think, the word sustainability, I love the word regenerative, and it can get thwarted by different industries in different ways. We just come back to what the heart of it actually means. The heart of it means that we need to live a one planet way of life.
So yeah, for us, like, the way I sort of think about it is, create more energy than you consume. From a way I like to think of, like, from the energy point of view, and because we do solar and batteries, it's about, and I think off grid's that real. When you are off grid, you sort of are limited. Where when a lot of people, when the grid's available, you can sort of, it's an open tap, turn it on, you got unlimited power, to go do what you want.
Management is definitely one, like thinking, okay, well, if I'm using resources, how can I replenish that? Or how, and in our current state, when not everyone's in that ability to be able to be in a state of replenishment, we do need to be creating more, like you're saying. We need to create more than what we consume, so there's enough for everyone else. But in a truly sustainable system, animals aren't necessarily doing that, are they? They just do enough. It's just enough. Yeah. But we're in a transition stage from one state of being into a more ecological state of being. And so that requires us, if we have the capacity, to create more to be able to support those who aren't able to create it. So that makes sense to me.
No, totally. So, I think a lot of people get caught up in the cities and think they need to go off grid, move in the middle of nowhere to be self-sufficient, or and there's so much you can do living in an urban environment. And for me personally, I love living in the urban environment. I want to try and create a community like what you guys have done, like really close to a town.
Yeah, nice.
In
I
the
think
city
it's absolutely essential. I think it's really essential. I think, the other things as well as the energy, I think that makes it really interesting for me is that when I turn on the tap, I know where the water's come from. I know how much I've got available to me. And so I'm conscious of that. And I don't necessarily have to teach my kids about, okay, so this is water and this is a sustainable way of using water. It's just like they see the tank. They know if the tank's empty, we don't have water. And so we just are conscious. And then you think, okay, well, it goes out, but where does it go to then? And it goes to our garden. So what do you put down the sink? Okay, well, let's choose products that are, suitable, that you want to actually eat at the other end, because that water's going out into the garden. So it's this circularity of the system and understanding the flows. And also we have two different water systems here. We have one that we collect all the water off our roofs, and that's what we use for our drinking and our showers. So we don't actually need a lot of water because we don't flush a toilet. We've got a dry composting toilet. So we cut 80% of our water consumption straight there, just on not having a flush toilet. And then anything to do with the garden or the laundry comes from a separate village scale water system. We have two pumps that go down into two creeks on either side and pumped up to high tanks and gravity fed through all of the houses in Crystal Waters. And we get an allocation of, I think it's 1,000 litres a day, but I have no intention of using that water at all. And I think the intention is to use it as least as possible, because what you're doing by using that water is pulling it out of the ecological system. There's platypus in that river. So when I'm watering my garden, I'm actually taking water from the platypus habitat. And so I'm really conscious of how much I water my garden. So that then makes me think, how can I design my garden to be absorbing as much water as possible and using plants that don't need all of that? And so, I guess it comes back to that, what I said before, it's the relationality going, okay, well, because I love the platypus and I really respect the platypus and I respect their habitat, I'm really conscious about the choices and decisions and the design system that I make in my own habitat, and see how my habitat is connected to their habitat. And I think that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, it's so true. And people get disconnected. I think that's where we said a lot of waste and a lot of things that people just don't really understand where things come from. And so it's definitely a really good point, that connection and of your environment, where it all comes from. So, mate, with Crystal Waters, how many homes are there?
There's about 80. Well, there's 83 lots. So, but there's more than that many homes, because many of the places have multiple homes on them, which you can legally do. So there's like the main house, and then there might be a secondary house or a little cabin or even a studio. And so all up, though, there's probably somewhere between 250 odd people living here. I would say there'd be capacity to have at least 500 people. But what happened in the early days is, because it's a community, a lot of people who are either one or two ended up moving in because they wanted to not be living by themselves somewhere, but they wanted to live in relation with other people. So, but there's a lot of families, a lot of young families. There's a lot of elders who've been here for decades who are still living here and maybe moved to a smaller house. But about 250 people spread across 83 lots across what is basically a square mile, so 650-ish acres all up. But having said that, like half of the land is forested land. There's a whole strip. So the best agricultural land was left at the start, so no one is able to build on that. All the riparian zones are protected. And there's these little sections that have good northerly facing aspect, so that they can grow good gardens, have good solar, good natural lighting, all of that stuff. So it's just these little strips on the mid slopes, so that we're not in the floodplain and we're not in the erosion zone. We're in the mid slopes with good aspect. So the other parts of the land here have been, there's woodlots or natural areas or, farming areas. There's 17 lakes that have been installed within Crystal Waters to help to rehydrate the landscape and to bring back biodiversity. I see so many migratory birds coming through here now, and I've started to get to know the patterns of my my year by what birds arriving in the trees in my garden or down in the lake below me.
Yeah, interesting. So, yeah, I've got a mate that Jeff. They're documenting on their property all the new insects and animals and things they find on the property. And yeah, the list is growing, which is great. So they get more and more animals coming to the property that they haven't seen there, and they've been there since 2001 or something. So yeah, over 20 years. So there's more and more habitat coming to the property.
Yeah, someone who's he's a mad bird watcher here. He did a study. I think there was I don't know, close to 200 species of birds. And then someone else did a study. It's over 30 species of frogs. No one's done an insect study. That would be fascinating. I would love to do it. Anyone's an insect enthusiast, come do a study up here. That'd be
great accommodation at Crystal Waters.
Yeah. That'd be amazing.
So being involved in the community, so what are some of the biggest benefits you've seen from that really helped over the years of being involved in the community?
There's that feeling of not being alone, and someone's always got you back. So what I find is when there's an emergency, everyone just comes together. And you probably see that in other towns, small towns as well. People come together and they know each other. So they know they're checking in on each other. So I particularly value that, for the elderly members of the community too, that there's people rally around a lot. There's a really good support network. Another thing that I really love about here is that when we're building our house and we need a resource, we just put out a call throughout the community and say, we're looking for a bit of tin for this or a stick of wood for that or something else. And it would just arrive, people would come and said, oh, can I help you put it up too? So there's that support network. There's also the open source sharing of information. When we were trying to work out what toilet to put in, we kind of did a little compost toilet tour around the village. What have you got? Show me your loo. And we'd go and stick our noses in everyone's toilet systems, and they would totally happily show us what it is. So it's this information sharing, this co-learning space. We also have a seed saving group, and there's people who trade plant resources, and there's little boxes of food that get left out. But it's this kind of the things in between. There's a little cafe and bakery that are here at Crystal Waters, and it's that social glue. The social glue, I think, is a lot around the care for this place. I think that's at the heart of it. And so feeling like you're part of something larger than yourself, and that you're working towards some kind of collective goal of regeneration, but not just for yourself, to be as a demonstration further and beyond. And so I think that for me is a really important part, that I'm participating in something that can have the capacity to be an example of another way forward. And I think for me, that's the most important thing for me. And if you ask someone else at Crystal Waters, they'll give you a different answer. But for me, that's why I'm here, not to drop out, but to really drop in to exploring what an ecological civilization, an ecological way of life, an ecological lifestyle can look like in a way that's I can reduce. So I really thought, okay, I took this very seriously. I went, gosh, if everyone lived like a typical Australian, we need four forests. What is it like to live a one planet way of life in Australia? So how to reduce my water use by 80%? If I cut everything by 80%, my energy use, grow as much food. What does that look like? And how can I do it in a way that still resembles something that people would like to live too? So I often have had school groups come through and planners come through and adult education classes and international visitors come through and have a look. And so we designed our house specifically to be something that people go, oh yeah, well, that looks pretty ordinary. It's a normal house. It's, lovely timber and tin. It's something appealing. It's not like, oh, I'll have to go and wear a hair shirt to live a one planet way of life. No. This is really nice. We've got beautiful polished floors, and it looks nice. It looks nice, but it's 80% less, in terms of our sourcing of everything. So that demonstration, the possibility to be with a group of other people who are also demonstrating. So you take a walk around and go, oh, well, and this one's a strawberry house and this one's a round earth house, and we decide to do this. And so you can explain, I'm an educator. So that's my main thing that I think is one of the key values that Crystal Waters is. Someone once described it's like a little beacon. Like we don't say we've got everything right. Actually, maybe I should explain, rather than a beacon, like it's a mushroom. And I have this theory of change, that we can change things not by trying to push over the top, but we go underground. It's like this underground revolution. And you think about how soil works and the mycelial network, and there's all these connective threads that connect all the different projects. And every now and then the mycelial network will push up some mushrooms, and you see all the unseen stuff. And Crystal Waters is one of those places, and you see these, and then all of a sudden they might spore and send out, billions of spores somewhere else, and they land in different places where the soil is fertile. So I focus on trying to help to create fertile places for good ideas to land, whether it be in our mind or in our communities. And I think Crystal Waters is one of those mushrooms that people can look at and see this mycelial network of amazing projects that happen around the world. I mean, I work with people in every continent, and, from refugee communities to on rooftops in New York, and these projects are happening and they make sense and they work.
No, definitely. So what is it with Crystal Waters being such a successful village? What do you think some of the key elements there that's made it so successful? Because I know I've been involved in a lot of communities before where they just don't last, or people come and go. And so what do you think is that real success that Crystal Waters has done different to create that community vibe and keep people in?
The possibility for having personal space and common space, and being really clear about that. I think for me anyway, that's helped to make. So I can have my own space where I have autonomy, and I also have community space where I have collective projects. I think that's really important, that you're not all in each other's, pockets all the time. That is important. Having a good infrastructure is important, like paying attention to that, so that the water system, the road system, the energy system is done as a collective whole, and that we have people that we employ to look after that. So I think that infrastructural side and having that done really well, having a design of the place, which means that the individual can buy and sell without necessarily having to, it's not a share. We have a title over our own place. And so I think those sort of things, it means that I can then go to the bank and I can get a loan if I wanted to. I have autonomy and I have structure. So the group title plan that this was designed under, it's kind of like effective like a squashed out body corporate system. While it's fraught with, trying to collectively make decisions about basic things, it is also makes it possible because it's worked out, and there's a balance of sweat, this place, before it became Crystal Waters, the eco village, the permaculture village, it was Crystal Waters, the community, and it rose to almost 200 people and then collapsed. And the lesson that we learned from that was that there was only a few people who were doing the work. No one had any real rights over the land or their place. It was all a bit fluid. And so arguments would happen and say, well, I'm doing more on that, I should get more. And it just kind of fell apart. So creating the structure so you don't actually have to worry about the equity of things, that's all taken care of. You can get on with actually living into it and adding extras. So there's like music nights and cafe days and, planting days and wildlife walks. And I've run children's clubs and, and we have our enterprises. So there's all that extra lifing that you can add on rather than trying to just work out the basic nuts and bolts. The nuts and bolts are dealt with. That's, that's done. We just get on with that.
Awesome. Yeah, with what I do with Provide Energy, there's a lot of communities been involved in and been to, and you see the sides of all of it. That's for me. I took my wife out. I would love to go live in. I call it my caravan park is what I want to build. I want to find somewhere just on the edge of a town and design it the fact that there's lots of different straw bale houses, hemp houses, rammed earth, and have all the different types. And I really want to do besides we have that community that live there, we have temporary accommodation. That's why I call it the caravan park, that people can come stay in the homes, experience them. And, if they enjoy it, they go back home, and hopefully it inspires them to build with more of a natural, sustainable material,
Exactly. And, your vision is exactly the reason why I came here. It's like, how can I help to be part of that shifting of the dial, not just going, I want to go and live my life and in a quiet little backwater somewhere. It's like to drop into it in a way that opens the doors to see, that people can have a taste. Because sometimes if you're growing up in a suburb, you don't have a chance to go and see what it's like to stay in a straw-bar house. Would I possibly like that or not? If I'm going to design my own place in the future, you need to have a taste of it, don't you? You need to get a smell of it. Like, does it smell moldy or not? You have these little fears in the back of your mind. But when you go to these places, you go, no, actually, this is really nice. It feels cool. It's, you get a whole, your decisions are made from more than your brain. Your decisions are made from your whole body sense of something. And I think that's really important.
Yep, that definitely. So there's emotions buying and good emotions buying, not the bad ones.
And we need more examples of these materials. There's phenomenal materials that are a really important part of not just the sustainable building industry, but also human health. I mean, so much of our modern materials are very toxic. And so, there's lots of different angles you could be looking at this. And also how you can design and build houses really affordably. I grew up with the culture of building a house. My dad built his first house when he was 13. His dad had come back from the war and he was really ill. My dad, being the eldest of that family, was responsible for building a house. So they landed on this piece of land and he went out and he got the timber and he brought it in. He built this log cabin, which still is standing now. My dad's 86 and this cabin he built when he's 13, still standing. I've got to know the new owners and had a chat with them. And then as I was growing up, they just built the house in Melbourne so owner builders. And then they built another house over the time down in East Gippsland, which we still have a relationship. And so I know every stick of wood in that. I know how it was built. I know the design. I was involved in the design of that as well. And so when it came to building my own house, it was like, well, I'll just owner build it. It was just a normal thing. And Dad would always talk about, in the newspaper, they used to have these openings, these sections in the newspaper every week that would have a design with the owner building plans. The newspapers would actually put out this, and it was part of the culture. And so if you go around Melbourne, I can spot them. I go, there's an owner builder one. There's an owner builder. That's, and I'd love to get my hands on like all those plans as a compilation somewhere, because they're the kind of things that I think are really useful now. Because if you ask, I grew up with the concept of owner building and understanding how building design works. But if you haven't, and you've always just moved into a place that's already done, like, how do we shift that? Like that sense of like, it's possible. It's really not that hard to build a house. It's simple maths, really.
Totally.
It's an amazing creative process. Like, I loved actually standing on my block and working out, okay, where's the best spot to collect the best views on here, or to get the best light, and angling things, and then doing little drawings, and then once I was actually standing on the footings of the place, and then I built up all the bearers, stood on there and go, where's the best view from here? And then actually framed the window up while I was standing on the bearers. Like, I had a plan, or generally there's a window here, but precisely where it went happened when I was actually building the frame and going, yep, that bit of the mountain there, that's my view. And that emergent process of design of a house, and then noticing, so there's a tree that's fallen over in our camping area here at Crystal Waters, and going, great. So I'll get that now. We milled that up and we stored it under the house, and that became all of our kitchen benches. I didn't know that when I was first starting to build, but it emerged as part of that process of being, looking around at what were the vernacular materials that I could utilize to enhance this design and simplify it too.
Yep. No, definitely. So, great. And so you mentioned before about kids and teaching kids, and you've got a pretty amazing story about your daughter. So tell us a bit more about unschooling and tell us a bit more about your daughter's story.
Yeah, well, I have to be honest, like I didn't set out to be an unschooler, homeschooler, whatever schooler. I just set out to be really present with my kids and try and respond to their learning environments. And as it turned out, I was absolutely fascinated whenever they were curious about something, I would just go out with them and we would explore their questions together and have so much fun. And it just became the natural thing to just continue that. So my kids ended up being, I've got 2 boys who are still here now, but I have a daughter who at 16 ended up getting into the Australian National University to study philosophy, politics and economics and linguistics. And so she's just started her second year now. She's 17. She's absolutely blitzing it. She didn't even finish year 10 at school. She decided when she was in about year 9, she said, Mum, I think maybe I should try the school thing and see what that's like. And so she went off and got herself a scholarship to go to, a fancy school down the coast. And we got her to that for a bit. And she just felt like such a fish out of water. And then COVID happened, I think, and she didn't want to do the online learning with that. And so she just stopped again. But what really made it work for her was that she had a sense of like understanding how to learn, like how to ask questions and how to seek out information and how to actually reach out to mentors. And so when she was when she was really fascinated about what politics is about, she said, okay, well, I'm going to join the Queensland Youth Parliament. And she joined that and she became the member for this area and had a year in Parliament as a youth member. She's really into music and just played music all day, mostly. And so she got into the Queensland Youth Orchestra. She would just have the time to focus on the things that were really interesting her at that time. It wasn't like, okay, we're now going to do a class on this, a class on that. It's like, you just dive as deep as you want. And then when you get to the end of your diving, you can sort of come back up for the air. And if you still want to continue that, that's great. But if you want to do something else, we'll take another deep dive. And I just took her wherever I was from the age, well, she was a sling when I was starting to teach permaculture courses again. And ever since she could walk and talk, she was teaching someone else about the worms or the chickens or guinea pigs or a herb in the garden. And just this natural emergence as being an educator and gathering information to be able to share it. And I think that's an amazing way to learn how to communicate. And so now, she decided she wanted to go and do economics, politics, and philosophy to work out how the system works, to be able to then understand how to better either communicate within the system or around it to be able to shift the dial with that. And she's having a great time down there. And it was really interesting. I was so happy with the ANU because they do have an opportunity to take people who've not gone through the normal school system. You have a meeting with them. You talk about the things that you're doing, what you're working on, and because she'd also done, I think what was an important part of her getting into the ANU was having done some Head Start programs before. So once you get to kind of year 11, 12-ish age, you can take free courses from Australian universities on a subject that you like. So each semester she would pick up another subject. So she did a bit of ancient history. She did a bit of English literature. She did a bit of architecture. She did all different topics. So she ended up getting offers to an architecture school, to the philosophy. She got offers to all these places. And because not only had she done her academic work, because she just worked on that, but she'd also done a lot of other interesting things. And what I also value about the ANU too is they encourage people to volunteer. So she's volunteering in the local food co-op, in the local botanic gardens, in the women's department, and that all goes on a transcript. And so why I'm telling you this is because learning and the whole person learning and really showing up with all of yourself is actually respected more highly and then documented as something that they know is going to hold you in good stead for wherever you go after that. And so we often get shoved down this funnel of trying to just get a mark and just do this thing, whereas we lose sight of all of ourselves. And the other thing that I really noticed is when she was out of school, she had this lightness of being. this freshness and a curious and a sparkle in her eye. And I noticed when she was at school, like this, she started like hunching and wouldn't do eye contact, and there was this sadness and a smell of fear about it. I don't know. It was visceral. So, every child is different, and I'm not trying to tell anyone else how to do education. I'm just saying what worked for us, and just following her lead. And my 10-year-old son is completely different. I'm trying to do maths with him this morning before I came on with you, and he struggles a bit to understand it, but he loves art. And so we were doing art maths, and he goes, "Oh, I get it, Mum. That's so great." And then he's busy out with the ruler, going out and measuring everything, working out areas and volumes. It's like, "Thanks, Mum." I was like, "Oh, great. Tick. Good, Mummy."
Yeah. That's totally. You will. Yeah. It's all, to me, I look at it as all one big experiment, one big practice, and you're just not going to know for another 20 years, or, so.
I think the thing is, you show up with the support, and you show up with the interest in what they're interested in. Like, for example, just one more example, my middle son, he's 16, he just turned 16. And to my horror, he's absolutely fascinated in cars, right? He loves fossil fuel cars. Like, aren't you interested in electric vehicles? We could set up a solar system. We could design it. Like, I'm saying, I'll support you to do that. But he's just so interested in how machines work. So, okay. I spotted this. I don't know why I'm admitting this on. But anyway, I spotted this V8 car on the side of the road. It's a Sora, like an old car. So he's got an old car that wasn't quite working, and he has been under the bonnet of that, like a grease monkey, working out how the whole thing works. He's fixed it up. He can't drive it because you can't drive a V8. So I knew that. But it was something that he really wanted so much that I felt, if that motivating force, if I see a motivating force that is a spark of interest, then I can wrap that around, and he'll understand how machines work. And then he can go, "Oh, well, actually, I understand that now. I can apply that thinking to something else." And so rather than pushing against what sparks him, I try and wrap it in love and wrap it in support, so that he can then unfold his learning from that place. And that's been my big lesson, not to push, because I end up in argument and tears.
Don't, mate. The government will ban petrol cars, so they'll do that job for you.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
Let them be the baddie. So, but yeah, it's so true. Like, our kids are 5 and 7, and I think like a lot of the permaculture properties I go with, it's a big challenge of, like for me, I look at school as a babysitter for the day. Like, allows me to get on and get my things done that I need to get done. But yeah, getting the kids interested, and if you can interested in something to learn. I was the same at school, but my maths teacher, my ag teacher were the first two to really work it out. That my maths teacher was like, we just send this kid out in the playground, give him a clicker, he'll go count it, come back, and I did. I enjoyed it. I don't like sitting and writing and all that sort of stuff. And it's funny, it's about measuring and tape. My son last night, my wife's away, and so last night I went to bed, and I woke up this morning. I got into the kitchen bench, and there's a tape measure, and all the credit cards lined up, and I was like, that wasn't there. I went to bed. I said to Lang, said, "Mate, you get in bed last night?" He goes, "Yeah, I was bored." He went and measured all the credit cards and got his tape measure, and
tape measure is so cool, particularly because they like click so much and whack, like as much noise, and it's fun. I love it. I absolutely love watching how learning happens, and I've actually learned a lot about how to become a better teacher for all the adult education classes that I do by being deeply engaged in this process. So, I teach permaculture teachers basically, and for people in all different contexts. And it really does come back about, again, building that relationship and being very responsive rather than just doing a cookie cutter. Here's a course, here's a course, here's a course. It's like, who are you working with? What are their needs? And what context are you in? And how do you make it make sense? And how do you connect it to where people are at so that they can find a way to integrate it or absorb it or adapt it and offer that lens? And so the kind of educational approach that I ended up, ages and ages ago doing a master's in sustainability education too. So in permaculture education. So landscape architecture, environment planning, education, and then wrap that all up together with this sort of lifetime of using my life as experiment. That's kind of where I'm at now, is like just trying to share that as far and wide as I can through whether it be podcasts or YouTubes or courses. And yeah, it's great. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest things that with when we took our kids to the permaculture class, and at work we teach, we have show one, do one, and then teach one. So you literally show how it's to be done, get the person you're teaching to do it, and then get them to teach it back to you. And then ideally they've learnt the lesson that you're trying to teach them. And I think that was the biggest thing for me. It was like when we went and did the kids permaculture class, it was the same thing. The kids were shown one, then they did one, and then they had to teach back to the teachers and explain it. And I think, that doing, I think it's what I think with the permaculture course, there's a lot of offshoots of people going out and doing like earthworks course afterward, or, we run a renewable energy course where we teach people how to build their own renewable energy system. So, so I think that's where people just they love that doing and going through the experience, most people. And it's when you really get the knowingness of something.
Yeah. And, I think too, paying attention to the context is really important, which is why having these places where people can come and learn and experience, and that you're not teaching them every single thing about it, but they're absorbing it by being in it. And I just noticed that, with the kids as well. So, for example, my middle son, who's he's also into bodybuilding at the moment. That's his big thing. He's like 16. He's 6'3" or 4. He calls himself. He's a unit, and so he needs lots of eggs, right? And so he comes up to the chickens up here and he's constantly looking for more eggs. Mum, you need more chickens. We've got to get more chickens. Okay. And then one day he came through and he said, Mum, I think you need to make sure the chickens have a little bit more grit. One of the eggs I had wasn't quite. And I was like, I didn't teach you that. I didn't teach you that. You have observed the quality of the eggs, and you've heard me explain to other people, and it's just going in. And so the context that he's growing up in a place where you keep chickens and they're in a natural environment and you are noticing the well-being, like he just took that on and then he fed that back. And I think there's something about the context that you create for learning to happen is so important. You don't have to be abouting about it. You don't have to teach about stuff all the time. You just do stuff within a place. It's like, so yesterday with the maths, we're out and we're talking about lemon myrtle and some Lagos spinach. And so when we took the leaves in, and then we were drawing them and measuring them and doing graphic design of them. So there's lots of lessons all in that. But I think just being, and then cooked up some of it as well. So it's this integrated learning. And I think this is just as important, not for kids, but for everyone. If we just go in and learn one thing and we don't connect it to everything else, it just stays orphaned as this piece of knowledge sitting over here until we really bring it into, like that's how I can use this knowledge. That's how it fits with my way of life. That's how I can make sense of it. It's that sense-making piece I think is really important.
Not totally. So, so if you implement it in your everyday life, just becomes a habit, and then things get done then. Otherwise, they don't. No, I really find it fast with kids and with permaculture, and it's one of the biggest things for us right now that we miss. We actually don't have chickens, and it's a big thing on our list, and we want to get and make happen basically in our life. But it's one of those things that's a big effort to get the chickens in. We have carpet snakes as pets. They're not pets. I'm scared of snakes actually. But we have snakes that live around here everywhere. So literally just behind my hot water system.
Oh, okay.
A few weeks ago, I was just opening the door and it's just sitting right on the hot water system. It's a big pipe. And our barbecue, it's our sign that the floods are coming. Every time we've had a flood, last time I've opened the barbecue, there's been a python in the barbecue. So
that's interesting.
That come home and there's a python in the barbecue.
Flood happening! Flood alert! Python in the barbecue. That's very funny.
That's it. So I was speaking to a friend this morning about the weather, and we had a blue tongue as well at the back veranda yesterday, and he had one as well in his house, and he lives down in the flood zone, and he said it's normally a sign that there's a weather event going to happen when the blue tongues come into the house and get out of the stormwater drains.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Well, I love those kind of observations. And the more that you stay in a place, the more that you notice those kind of things. Like I've got a bird that particularly arrives just before the wet season's about to come. And I know within a week or so, without fail, it's going to happen. And the longer you're in place and the more that you pay attention to those things, I find it absolutely fascinating. And, we've only just been in place. Like I've been here for just over 25 years. You've been in your place for 7 years or so.
Yeah.
Imagine the knowledge, the collective knowledge that you get if you've been in a place for 100,000 years. Like, it's phenomenal. I absolutely find it fascinating. So I also do spend a lot of time wandering around the place too with a couple of the elders from here, just to try and understand the knowledge of place here and what it means and the things that they're noticing, just to
it's one of the biggest things for me with my caravan park when I build it. And one thing I see is even in businesses these days, where it used to be always dad teaching the son, and the dad would really teach the son as much as he could, because that family business normally get passed down. That sort of doesn't happen these days. But it's a big thing that I think that by shoving all old people into these over 55 retirement villages, and that knowledge is not getting passed on. I know there's some around here. There's some really cool things where they have they have daycare days where you can go drop your kid off, and a grandparent will look after your kid for 4 hours a day, and that's the stuff in a community hall. But I think that knowledge is the biggest thing for me. I was like, well, if they're just shoving it all in an over 55s village and they're not interacting with the kids or the community, just the information's gone forever. That's so valuable to be able to have interactions with those people.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier about learning how to build a house. My mum's dad was a carpenter. He taught my dad how to do the fine joinery work, and my dad's taught us, and then my kids were around that. So we know how to make a window, we know how to make a house, we know how to build a door and a gate and a floor and a frame, and that house building, the passing down of those practical knowledge and skills. And that's kind of one of the things I really like about actually the permaculture way of life, is because it's very practical. It's like, well, how do you grow a garden? How do you keep chickens? How do you build something? How do you set up a water system? How do you harvest water in your landscape? Like, they're really practical skills that just help you to understand how to live a simpler, more sustainable way of life.
Yeah.
And, I think these kind of skills are things that we're going to need to know more and more, as things unravel a bit as we're heading forward. Like, these are just basic skills. And I'm not a prepper, but I think we do need to know this stuff, and there's many places that can demonstrate it and share it. I say I'm not a prepper because I get scared about the whole kind of like the gun prepper thing, but I don't think there's anything wrong with actually recognizing that we are in a climate and ecological crisis, and things are, not going to be easy over the next while, and we need to be setting up systems in a way that means that people understand how to feed themselves, get water, process waste, live simply, all of that kind of thing. Yeah. And, whatever happens, that kind of thing is going to be good for any scenario, Yeah,
that's it. No, definitely. Yeah, reducing the stress on the system is how I like to think about it. And, I think the world would be a different place if everyone looked after their own shit, basically, literally. So, yeah.
Totally. I'm talking about shit. I am absolutely disappointed how much compost you get out of a composting toilet as well. Here's me thinking, great, I've got my compost sorted. Our whole household full of compost, but we get like maybe a barrel load every half a year. Like, it's not much. I'm able to cut 80% of our water use and, get off all the sewage, and I get that much compost. It's like, really?
Yeah.
And you think, collectively in Australia, how much infrastructure we use to deal with shit, whereas actually it can be done quite simply. So I really love my compost toilet, I have to say. I'm so happy with it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, there was one thing I was disappointed about myself when I teach my kids when they did the permaculture course. Like, Dad, did you know you can grow food out of poo? Oh, it was so funny. So any opportunity for the kids to talk about poo, they love it these days.
That's right. It's a really good topic. Worm poo, chalk poo, human poo.
Yeah, no, definitely. Mate, so if there was one thing for people at home listening to go away and implement in their lives or do, what would you recommend?
Oh gosh, that's such a hard question because everyone is different, like to tell what you one thing. I mean, there's so many different ways to answer this question. The one thing might be like, what's your next thing? The next thing that you could do to shift the dial on living towards a one planet way of life. Maybe there's something you've been wanting to do. Just take the step to go out and do it. But as a broad brushstroke answer to your question, I would say really connect with your food system. Like if there's anything else, like the most energy consuming thing in the world and water consuming thing and chemical producing thing and health destroying thing and planet destroying thing is our industrial agriculture system. So if we can, one, either grow some of our food, support local food systems, support regenerative food systems, be connected with your food system in whatever way that looks like where you are, to bring the food production closer, that would be it. And so that might be, even if it's just growing sprouts on your windowsill and supporting the local farmer down, in your peri-urban area, then that would be the thing, or local farmers market, or thinking differently about eating more seasonally and using all the parts of the food and not wasting it, fermenting your apple peels and making, just connecting more deeply with local food. And that can look like a lot of different things in a lot of different places. And learning how to do that and design that kind of system well is really what permaculture is, at the heart of what permaculture is about.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. When we teach our energy courses, so we teach people how to design their off-grid solar system. And every time I go to Jeff Lawton's and he's running the course, he's like, Mike, come up here and tell everyone, So, and the question I always ask is, I always ask people, like, if you're to do one thing to reduce your energy consumption on the world, the world's one big fuel tank, what would it do? And everyone's talking about LED lights, put solar up, and get electric car, all this stuff. And it's just like, and I always say, just grow. The three things is grow your own food, harvest your own water, and catch public transport if it's possible. So and people just don't realize how energy intense food is. So
yeah. It's and there's things like New Zealand and England both export and import the same amount of butter. Like, so as much butter gets exported from England to New Zealand as New Zealand. Like, why? Like, why not just eat your own? This is embedded in the entire food system because it's about global trade. It's not about, and it's about creating commodities. It's not about growing local food. And all the subsidies that all inherent in the food system are to encourage trade. And like, if you look at any agricultural system, it'll all be about how can you get as much export market as possible. Like, whereas what we need to focus on, how can we shift the dial and shift, even like this is more at a policy level, shifts at the subsidies are supporting localized food system instead of globalized food systems. But what we can do, each and every one of us, is just to be a little bit more connected with our food system. And that is going to help to shift the dial in so many things. Like I said, it's the energy system, it's the water system, it's the economic system, it's our health system. It's about how we feel emotionally about the place we're in, because as soon as you start to go out and grow food, you start to notice, like, oh, look, there's a butterfly, or oh, there's a bird coming and landing on that, and oh, what's going on in the soil? All of a sudden you're inherently connected with place. And there's something that happens inside you when you do that, is there's this greater sense of well-being. Your endorphins just kind of rush and you feel good. And there's so many different dimensions to local food. And I think brilliant.
They say that the world's problems can be solved in a garden, so awesome. Mate, well, thank you. I really appreciate it. So it's been a good conversation. So
lovely to chat.
We'll put all Morag's details down below. And because you teach permaculture courses at Crystal Waters?
I teach permaculture courses. I teach permaculture teachers and also permaculture business classes, how to set up a permaculture business, and permaculture gardening online too.
Excellent. We'll put all the links below where people can find you and go from there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, mate. Next time. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found the content educational and inspiring. If you got something out of it and you think you know someone else that would actually also enjoy it, we'd really appreciate if you could share the link with them and encourage them to check out our channel. And don't forget, you can join the Off Grid Tribe podcast for free, where you can actually ask and interact with myself, and also our guest speakers. To jump over today to theoffgridtribe.com, register yourself an account where you can actually have a conversation with myself and one of our guest speakers, and we can continue the conversation there. Together, let's embrace the power of sustainable living.